Welcome to Season 3 of The Lifestyle Chase, and I'm your host, Chris Liddle. This podcast features high performers who have found a way to live their best life while balancing their health, wellness, friends, and family. To help this podcast grow, please share it on social media, rate 5 stars, tell your friends, and check out the past 140 episodes and counting. You can follow me on Instagram at Christian Liddle and at The Lifestyle Chase. Thanks for listening. Let's get started. So welcome to The Lifestyle Chase. This is the first episode of Season 3, and it doesn't necessarily make it any different from Season 2. But I am joined today by the one and only Beverley Simpson for episode 141. So how are you today?
Chris, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really excited.
So what was your morning routine like today? Because I noticed you got up pretty early. Like you were liking one of my posts at what might have been like 6 hours ago or something like that.
I love this question. This is a great question. So I actually have been I've been doing my best to stay really consistent with my morning routine because I have 2 little kids. And so my time when they are sleeping in the morning and when they go to bed, that is very precious time to me. It's probably one of the only times that I have for myself. And so for me, it's really important that I set my intention for the day. And also, Chris knows this because he knows me, but for those of you who don't know me, I run a mile an hour both, and how I am really like just running all the time so fast. So it's very important to me that I take that time in the morning to slow down, set the intention for the day, journal, and then do that eat that frog work. So I'll do my social media connection work right in the morning, and then I dive into and then I work out and dive into my day.
So to give my audience a bit of an introduction to you, I'll give you an introduction to my audience. So my audience, I've got a good amount of people from Edmonton that listen. But then I've got about 40% of my audience is based in the US, and there's been people that have listened to the show from as far as India, Australia, etc. And so if you were going to introduce yourself to all of these people in a matter of like a minute or less, what would your introduction sound like?
I'm Beverley Simpson. I'm the owner of Simpson Fitness, and I'm the founder of the PT Profit Formula. And I help personal trainers and clinicians connect and attract their ideal clients so that they can build businesses both online and in person.
And so now something I'm notorious for is going into the handy dandy time machine. Sometimes I think like if I would only reflect back and be like, how many times have I said handy dandy time machine? But we're going to take you back 15 years. Can you recall what life was like 15 years ago?
Oh my gosh. I can't even remember what I did 7 days ago, Chris, let alone 15 years. Okay. So let's do the math. It's 2020, right? So that's 2005, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So in 2005, I was actually living in California because that's where I grew up. I grew up in the Mountain View area. So I was living in California, and I had just finished. I was about a year out of college. And so I was in the grind of the real estate. I can't believe this is way back there. I was an admin assistant for Cushman and Wakefield, and I was chasing that Broadway dream. So in fact, because I was an admin, that was my day job, and I was auditioning and doing a whole bunch of musical theater, because that's what my undergrad was in. That's what brought me to New York. I'm in New York now, and I've been here now for 12 years, but musical theater was what brought me to New York.
So what was the why or the motivation towards doing what you were doing at that time? Like what made you interested in musical theater? What was your purpose?
Mm. So, Chris, my purpose has changed over the years as, things have gone along in my life, but I wanted to do musical theater. I was an entertainer basically from the moment I was born, and that I just wanted to be in front of people. I wanted to entertain. I loved singing. I really loved singing. And I think, and what's interesting to me now, as just to, I'll go back on the time machine, I swear. But what's interesting to me now is that all the things that I loved about performing and about musical theater, with the exception of singing, of course, I still get to do that in my daily life. I'm always on, I'm presenting. Like I don't feel like there's an absence of performing in my life. I feel like I do it all the time. So it's interesting to see how I still have stepped into what I'm meant to do, even though it doesn't look the way that I thought it was going to look back then. But that was really my calling and why I loved it. I loved doing that. And so I was doing really well in California. And so I said, you know what? I just really want to give it a go, because if I don't give it a go, I never will. So I went to New York, and I went to like a Cat 21. I went to a very intense musical theater graduate school. And what happened was that I had this belief, or yeah, belief is the right word, but I had this belief that my voice didn't match my body type. And so I was constantly chasing this specific look that I was supposed to look like based on the way that I sounded. And for the record, nobody said that. This was something that I had created in my mind, and I had believed that musical theater was a narcissistic industry. And I believed that it was constantly, what do you look like? What do you sound like? And those were the pressures. And so that's what really brought me into fitness, was that I was just chasing this look, that I had to look a certain way and sound a certain way. And so what happened was that I was spending so much time in the gym. I took my day job there, and I had this moment where I took a personal trainer job, and I had this moment where I saw my client actually succeed. And it was such a fulfilling moment for me, that she was so happy that she had done something that she had set her mind to do, which I think ultimately at the end of the day, that was also what I was chasing for myself, is that I had, could achieve what I was set out to do. And I felt like, oh, I need to leave this narcissistic industry because it's not fulfilling, and move into theater or move into fitness. And what I have now recognized since I've had my two children is that that wasn't the case. It wasn't about the fact that theater was narcissistic. It was that I had all of these beliefs about my body and what I should look like. And it didn't matter what industry I was in, that, wherever you go, there you are, is what I ultimately discovered when I had my kids. And so it led me to where I am today, running my own business. That whole progression from going from personal trainer to assistant fitness manager to fitness manager, and growing that drive for achievement, which is something that's been with me since 15 years ago, 2005.
That was awesome. And it gives me a lot to work with, because this year has been unlike any other. We don't need to beat the dead horse talking about COVID-19, but so much of this year has really reframed how people have seen things. I mean, you talked about just your image of yourself. I think that's something a lot of people can relate to, in that we get in our own way in a lot of cases. When you were first moving to New York, what was your inner monologue like? Was there anything talking you out of it? Were you scared? What was that journey like?
The journey was of course I was scared, but not scared in the sense of, Actually, no, I wasn't scared. I was sad. Sad is a better way to say it because I was sad to leave my friends. I've lived there since I was a little kid. I had friends and I still am friends with those people today. I mean, my nearest and dearest friends are still in California and we still talk all the time. So that was hard. I was sad, but I was mostly excited. I was mostly excited for this new adventure. I had never lived in another state. I had never I went to college and undergrad, and that's actually my only regret. I actually don't live in regrets. I really do operate from a place of everything is happening for you and for a reason. But if you ask me if there was one thing I could go back and change, it would be this, is that I didn't live abroad when I had the opportunity in college. That's the only thing, because I do love to travel. It is a big thing for me. I love that. We took my my daughter to Spain for her first birthday. So travel was important. But I was mostly excited because I had never done anything outside of what I know.
Yeah.
So I was excited.
Well, the cool thing is, I don't imagine you had a lot of certainty as to what to expect when going to New York. Like, did you know everything was going to go as planned? Did everything turn out the way you expected it to?
Absolutely not. I mean, it was 100% nothing like I thought it was going to go. But it was still, I'm just so glad I'm still live here. I mean, first of all, when I first arrived, for any of you who've never been to New York, and I mean, it's different now, but back then it was I couldn't sleep for the first week because that whole concept of the city never sleeps, that's a real thing. Like, the energy in the city was just so intense that I felt overstimulated for a long period of time. And now recognize too that I was coming from I already had a job. I was an admin assistant. I was living on my own. And then I came to New York, and now all of a sudden it kind of felt like I was stepping back in time in terms of my development, because I was literally, now I'm waitressing. I'm back in grad school. I kind of felt like I had gone back in time as opposed to moving forward. Even though I was moving forward, it just felt different. And I was living in San Francisco in my own apartment, and you could see the Golden Gate Bridge from my house. And now I'm living in Harlem in an apartment that I had never even seen. And my room was so small, it could only fit my bed. And when you put my bed on loft, you couldn't sit up in my bed, otherwise you were hitting the ceiling. And then you couldn't stand straight in my room because I had my bed in there. That's what it was like. So I felt like I was, I turned 26 back to 18.
That is powerful perspective, because so much of what this year has encompassed and so much of what anybody's career in the fitness industry will involve is a whole bunch of moments where you're not sure if you want to make that next move because you don't know what's coming. And then in most of the conversations that I have with people, they don't really have that much regrets. They might have wished they would have traveled a bit more, or spent time in different environments or different rooms kind of thing. Just so much of this year has been the virtual room, getting to be in conversations with people that you wouldn't have otherwise thought to have a conversation with. When it came to your development in the fitness industry, when you're getting all these promotions and stuff, what was that like? Was it challenging? Was it as you expected? Did it come as a surprise?
No, what happened was that no, it didn't come. It didn't come as a surprise, and it wasn't challenging. I mean, of course, there's going to be challenges, right? And I know that I'm hesitating on that, but I really do operate from this perspective that everything that is happening to me, even if it's good, bad, whatever that interpretation is, it is happening to me for a reason. I'll give you an example, right? You brought up COVID, and you talked about how that has that experience for many fitness professionals has been life changing for them, completely altered anything that they thought their vision. I mean, you see these memes now and it's funny, I laugh, but you see these like journals or these planners that are just on fire for 2020 because it's just nothing that we expected could have ever happened. But for me, when COVID hit, I was so grateful for all the things that had gone bad and wrong and awful in the years prior. I mean, there was last summer, and I've told this story on a previous podcast before, but last summer there was a moment where my husband and I were driving back from Michigan, and he said to me, he was like, I don't think there's room on our credit card to put gas in the car. And I was like, oh, cross your fingers, just try anyway. Right. And so I'm so grateful for that moment. It's better now, right? We're fine now. But I'm so grateful for that moment because now when I was faced with COVID, I thought, oh, it's okay. I can face anything once I've faced that. Knowing that I had 2 children and that I'm leaving my job and the way that it looks, and I moved out of Manhattan into Westchester, I've faced that. I can face this. Like, to me, I almost felt like this is exciting. Now I can help people change the way that they're looking at it. For me, it's always about perspective. It's always about looking at it from, what can I learn from this? Because you're either going to get the success that you want or the lesson that you need. Right. So for me, when I got into the fitness world, I learned from, our mutual friend, Kyle Dobbs. He was not at first, but eventually he became my fitness manager. He was the one that promoted me to his AFM at the time. But I learned everything about science of training from him back then. And then as he grows and develops, I continue to just follow his lead in that regard. But for me, I was so excited to meet him and to learn because I have such a drive. That is just something that's innate. And hey, friends, for the record, that's both my curse and my blessing, that need to achieve, because I was just constantly going after it. I really wanted to help my clients to the best of my ability. And so I was learning, reading, studying. I mean, I lived in the gym. This was back in the time when I didn't have children. So for me, I was happy, and I was going for that type of achievement. So I wasn't surprised. I was one of the quickest personal trainers in that company to go up the ladder from trainer to AFM to fitness manager to district fitness manager. But I'm not surprised in the sense because I go after it. And I do tend to be the person that sets their mind on something, and then I'm relentless. I won't stop until I achieve it. Both a blessing and a curse.
Well, I mean, that's something that I can definitely relate to. It's just like we get that tunnel vision, and it's just a lot of things take the back burner, and you get driven to the extent that you are willing to take your failures as lessons, and you are willing to see the value in every possible experience, whether it was positive or negative. Something that really caught my attention that I think a lot of people will find helpful is, like, you talk about that experience where it's like, will this card actually clear the transaction for gas? Like, let's dive into that a bit further if you're willing, and talk about what led up to that moment and what that was like, and like how you overcame that.
Sure. And I will say this as a disclaimer, right, for anyone who's listening, is that, like, I'm not in terms of, in terms of financial advice, like, that is definitely, meet with your financial advisor. I have met with mine. We've cleared that up right now, so we're good. It's not something necessarily that I would recommend as I tell this story, just for the record. But for me, what happened is that I am a coach, right? I'm a coach both as a trainer, I'm a trainer, and also as a business coach. So for me, I am someone who values coaching so much to the extent that I can't in good conscience ask somebody to invest in me if I'm not investing in myself. And so what had happened is that when I decided to go into my own online business, I didn't know what I was doing. So I hired a coach to help me do it, right? And so it just took so many coaches. I had to go through a lot of people before I could decide, who was actually going to give me a good ROI. And it just took me a long time to figure that out. And I made decisions not knowing that, not knowing that there was a better way. And again, this is not about it being bad or wrong or that those coaches did anything bad. They didn't. They just gave me the lessons that I needed. If I could go back and talk to my younger self about, the investment choices that you are going to make in yourself and in your business, you just better get really clear on what that ROI is going to look like for you, because it's important. But there are a lot of people out there that are claiming to be the latest and greatest, but you need to have some metrics that matter. And that's not to say that everything's all sunshine and roses, because when it comes to marketing, and just like fitness, right? If you're chasing a fitness goal or working on a fitness goal, it's not a linear progression. It's all about guessing, testing, and assessing. And I live by that mantra. And so now I know what the metrics are that matter. Now I can look at how my business is running on a quarterly basis as a business and know where the areas of opportunity are to increase performance. When back then, when I got into debt and got into trouble, I didn't. It was like it was as if I was just throwing spaghetti on the wall and hoping that something sticks. But now I am much smarter in terms of my investments, both in the business and in myself, and know what my areas are of opportunity. And I'm much more discerning in terms of how I spend or how I invest in the business. Now, that's not to say that I don't invest. I do invest all the time. And I still operate from a place of abundance, because that was also part of it. I was coming from this place, and I still live by that place where I knew that it was going to come. I already operate knowing that it's going to happen. My success being inevitable was not a question. I knew it was going to happen. It was just a matter of time and a matter of getting all the puzzle pieces in the right places. So that was how and why I was making those financial decisions. And I still operate from that, knowing that, my business will go from multiple six figures into the 7-figure mark. I know that that's going to happen. I just am now much more discerning. And that is by design. That is so that I can feel safe and sleep and know that my kids can eat. So it's more, and my kids can go to school and that they get what they need. So so I can still be both abundant and operate from that place and still invest in what I know, in coaches that I know will help me. And that's not about like, they need to get my business at 7 figures or they're not a good coach. That's not what this is, because it's actually not about outcomes. It's more about the process, and it's about knowing, can you assess what's happening inside of the process? And can you assess where the areas of opportunity are to increase performance? That's what matters to me. And so, but I just didn't, you don't know what you don't know. I didn't know that back then. I do now. But so now I'm just much more discerning. And it's better.
Well, I like that. And you brought up the word discernment, discerning. That's something that intrigues me, and I'll give some context. So, like, when it comes to mentorships, mentors, people who help others in this industry, it's one of those things that either makes me feel better or just totally sets me off, because there are just so many people out there that might not have my best interests at heart. And I found I would have to say it kind of comes back to talking about core values, talking about things beyond the outcome, but yeah, that journey. And when I can find that I align with the journey of someone else, or if I can align with the values of someone else, then I'm more positioned to get a better outcome. And so I will say that I am kind of snobby when it comes to people that help me with stuff, which makes me excited to bring you onto the podcast, because for you're someone who stands out to me as someone that can help people with their marketing and their social media. And you have sat in the shit for a bit. You've had to struggle and learn things the hard way, and yeah. You have tried to throw the spaghetti at the fridge and see what sticks. That is something that is necessary. If we want to have the medals of honor, we have to go to war kind of thing. It's necessary. But going back to what we were going to talk about more is like that act of discerning. Like, if you were to create a rubric for how you discern your choices, your everything, what is that based off of? What's your rubric?
That is a really good question. How do I determine, what is a sound investment and what is not? Because at the end of the day, when we're talking about it in terms of this, right? So things that I'm investing in, and when I use that word, I'm talking about, paid traffic. I'm talking about mentorship in terms of, having my own coach. And I'm also talking about, investments in terms of, growing, because as you grow, you're going to need to take on a team. And so there's going to be a period of time where you're going to be more on the investment, whether you are investing in finances, resources, or time. Time and money are inverses of each other. And I tend to be more discerning with my time, because time you can't get back. But money, we can always find, attract, whatever resonates with you. So for me, and hey, also for the record too, I just want to say, I've also learned, it's true, I have learned things the hard way, and I'm glad, because now I can help my clients not do the same thing. Don't make the same mistakes that I did, but just know that these things that we're talking about in terms of, business growth, I think a lot of trainers and a lot of people, business owners, right? If we don't have a good relationship with our money, and when I say good relationship, I mean know what's happening with your money, know what your money is doing, then now with whatever amount that you're making, if that relationship doesn't exist now, what's causing you to think that it's going to exist all of a sudden when you achieve this arbitrary 10K a month that people are often chasing? I think what happens for so many, and I know this happened for me, it was I lived by this, it'll be okay when I make 10K a month. I'll just figure it out when I make 10K a month. And it was just that arbitrary number, not recognizing, number one, 10K a month does not mean 10K salary. You could be making 10K a month, but how much needs to go back into the business in terms of your Facebook advertising, in terms of your employees, in terms of whatever it is that your overhead. And I also think, and as you grow, when you get, new level, new devil, right? Now you've made all these sales, and now you have to work on the fulfillment, but how are you also keeping the top of the funnel functioning? You're only one person, and 24 hours in a day is finite amount of resource, and people give that away freely. So I think for me now, when I'm looking at those kinds of things, first of all, it took me some time, but I did find my mentor that helps me with my marketing. It is somebody that I can, I work with James Wedmore. And so I feel really good about that. I can point to my successes. I can point to the things that he's helped me with specifically. So I'm finally solid on that. But that took some time, right? That took some time guessing and testing to see who works for you, because it's not that my other coaches were bad or wrong. I see tons of value in what I learned from them, but it's more about just making sure that your mentor speaks to you, that your mentor can help you and actually say what they're going to, do what they say that they're going to do, and follow through. That is a huge component. That is really important to me, is that being able to follow through, and then knowing what's happening inside my business. It's just something that's really important to me as a coach. And I didn't recognize that or know that until later,
Yeah.
So that was, that's one thing. But now for me, I'm just making sure that I'm out of debt. Like, that is something that, like, I want to make sure that I'm out of debt. And that, so when I'm making decisions that are financial, that maybe, like, for example, in this last launch, I had budgeted $5,000 for my Facebook advertising, but then things didn't go well at first. Like, hey, listen, I'm not immune. Things go wrong in my business all the time. So the second I could see that it wasn't firing off the way that I wanted it to, I pulled back. And I made that choice to pull back because I needed to make sure that my offer converts. And so, I'll make, so I just have, specific things that I know, and I make the decision. I think that's the other thing too, that CEOs, if you're running your own business, to recognize you're just making decisions all day long. And so for me, I'm always going through worst case scenario. If I lost this $2,000, would this mean that I go into debt? No, great, I'm good. Would this mean that my business goes under and that I have to wrap things up? Then good. No. Is this 2K scary and going to strap me and I'm going to have to sacrifice some other things? Yeah, it could. So I'm going to make that choice, but at least I won't be in debt, right? So those are kinds of the things, those are kind of the barometers and the thought process that I go through when I'm making decisions. And also, and that's how I'm able to stay abundant, because I'm not operating from this place of money is a finite resource. I don't believe that. I really do think that we can attract it, we can get it, we can find it, we can make it. But I'm just I'm very careful and do my best to make financially sound decisions. And so far, since last summer, we're good now. It's been going well.
That's awesome. Something that you got me thinking about with all of this, because a lot of people, I mean, they'll get sort of attached to that idea of like hustle, and in some ways it can be that idea of it's not work unless it's tied to a certain amount of money. Like it's not marketing unless you are investing in Facebook, and that's not necessarily the case for everybody. When it comes to creating more of like a long-term sustainable growth mindset approach, like what are the holistic things that you need in order to like stay sane and in order to have like a fulfilling lifestyle and not burn out like every couple months kind of thing?
I love this question. And it's a hard question for me to answer because, listen, I'm a high D. For those of you who know what that is on the DISC assessment, I am a driver. I'm a driver, and I tend to hustle all the time. But I really worked on what I like to call the seasons of hustle, because and what I mean by seasons of hustle, and I think that, especially if you've got fitness professionals that do listen to this, or people who are actively working out, that the rest is in the work, or that rest is the work. Essentially, your muscle is recovering, your work is in the rest. And so for me, I have to remind myself, and I have to put myself in that, to remind myself that it's important to be in that season. And to recognize too, and this is something that I think had come from the gym days, is that, and I think that it happens to a lot of trainers, is that we're so used to training dollars for hours, and that we think in order to earn more, we have to work harder and work more hours. But friends, it's just not true. It's not true. Why? Because everyone only has 24 hours. That's all that there is, right? So we have to figure out ways that we can leverage our time. Otherwise, you can't train 24 sessions in a day. It's just not possible, right? And so we have to find those ways that we can leverage our time. And so for me, when I also look out into the space, and when I'm trying to get out of that hustle mentality and stop working harder, because it's not about working harder, it's about working smarter. I look out into the field and I ask myself, who's doing what I want to do? And I'm not doing that in a case of, I'm not looking at that to try and compare myself. That's not the comparison, is the thief of joy. I can't remember. Eleanor Roosevelt, I think, said that, but it's not about comparing, but I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at those people, and I'm celebrating their success, because it's just evidence. That is evidence to my brain that I can do what they can do, because what's possible for them is possible for you. So that's how I'm always looking at it. And for me, and this is just me personally, and I think a lot of trainers have to, go through, are similar to this, and it's just my opinion, but I have to fight that need to hustle, because I do hustle. Like, I am not a stranger to hustle. And I actually actively spend time to avoid it. It's just too easy for me to fall into that trap. And it is a trap, make no mistake, because the work is in the rest. So that's why I've set up my business to have what I now call seasons of hustle. Because listen, there's a spectrum, right? It's a paradox. There's a paradox in fitness and there's a paradox in fitness business, which is that, okay, Beverley, so you don't want to hustle, but then on the other side of the spectrum, people are like, let's look at that 4-hour work week, right? It's not about how many hours, how much. It's not about like how much can I work in the shortest amount of time possible. It's more how efficient can I work and get my machine running in order to have more time for rest and increase my profit margin. That's really what it's about, working efficiently. So now I've built into my business seasons of hustle where I'm spending the time working on the top of the funnel and increasing the audience and running my launch and running my sales and trying to generate the revenue, right? That's a season. And then I go into my more times like right now where I'm just in fulfillment and I've got some things that are always slow burning in the back, but that I'm just spending the time connecting with the people that are already here and fulfilling on the people that are already here. Because I think that's also an area of opportunity that a lot of trainers miss, is that they are just always looking for more, when if they could just stop and connect and spend more time with who's already here, that's only going to help you with your top of funnel.
Well, I think that's an awesome like takeaway for people to understand, like everything that you need is already like in your environment. It's just about like looking at it differently and looking at those inefficiencies and looking at where like the money may escape. But we've talked about so many things that kind of coincide, that kind of like they're expected, they're anticipated, and we've talked about fitness. You are a mother, and like how did that journey begin?
Yes, I am a mother. That is true. And it's really funny. It's funny. So what happened, and it's funny because nobody thought I was going to have children, at least in my family, right? I met my husband the second night I was in New York, by the way, and I've been in New York now for 12 years. We've been together for 12 years, almost 13. And, we got married in 2011 and we were living the life. I mean, I kick myself now, but again, this is all about lessons, right? These are lessons that I need. But back then we were a 2-income family, just the two of us living in Manhattan. I mean, we joke now about how we thought we were broke then, but I'm laughing and I'm like, we were broke because we gave all our money to the Indian restaurant around the corner. I mean, those were the days. Anyway, so what happened was that I'm actually, this is still true, I'm not really awesome with children. I'm awesome with my children, but when I was around other kids, like not that I didn't like them. Wasn't that I disliked them. It wasn't that. It was just that I was just kind of awkward. I'm not really a kid person. And so no one thought I was going to have children. And then what happened was it was Christmas time of 2015. Yeah, it was Christmas of 2014. And mind you, my husband and I have been married now for almost 5 years. And we thought we were pregnant. And it turned out that we weren't. And so I was disappointed. So that was when I was disappointed that I wasn't pregnant. And I was 33 at the time, or 32 at the time. And so when I felt that disappointment, I said, okay, listen, it's now or never. We're either doing this or we're not. And we decided to do it. So we ended up having my eldest daughter, who's turning 5 in October. She was born October 2015. So we got pregnant that January. And then we wanted there to be a 2-year age difference. But, so we thought it was going to take us some time. Turns out it didn't. And so our kids are 20 months apart. We had Abigail in 2017. And so what happened, I mean, and I live by this, and I'll say this forever. They are my greatest teachers. They are my greatest teachers. And more often in this life, I think that if adults could spend more time, maybe not moving, because it's not saying that they're movement efficient, just for the record, but their personality and the way that they show up in the world, I want to be more like them than I want them to be like me, right? They just teach me so much about love and compassion and curiosity and confidence. Like children are taught, fear is brain-based, but there are a lot of fear components that they get taught, right? So anyway, all that to say that when I became a mom in 2015, I was still working at my gym. I was still the fitness manager at the gym, and I stayed there for a year. Then I got pregnant, and my pregnancies, for the record, were awful. They were truly horrible. I had two terrible births and two terrible pregnancies, which led me to what I was doing, which is I recognized, I had been a trainer in the field at that time now for a couple of years. And I thought, oh, I'm so smart. I'm the smartest trainer in the world. Ego's the enemy. Ryan said that. But then all of a sudden I got pregnant and I was like, what is this body? What is this alien inside of me? This is terrible. I went as far as my sister told me not to Google, and I didn't. I knew nothing about what was going to happen, what was going to happen after. So much so I was on a phone call with her, and she said, Beverley, you're still going to look pregnant when the baby comes out. I was like, wait, why? No, the baby's out. Right? So it was quite an experience, and that was the biggest transition of my life. That was when I was like, oh, that moment and that birth, the birth of Gwen, was when I recognized and realized I had so much inner work to do about body image, about just literally everything, because your whole world changes. It becomes more about, I thought that was when I recognized that it wasn't the theater industry that was narcissistic. It was me that was narcissistic. And your whole world kind of becomes, what is the type of role model that you want to be for your kids? And so when I asked myself those questions, I recognized I needed to make some bigger changes in my life, both in how I viewed my body, both in how I was working, my work ethic, both in, both in my rest, making sure that I'm prioritizing time for them, because I've said this multiple times on the podcast, but it's true. Time we can't get back. And so I can't, this time that I have with them here with me, it's going to go so fast. I will blink and they'll be grown, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, that was pretty powerful in the sense that it left me with something to think about that I can really stem from here. You talked about how that Christmas that you thought that you were going to be expecting, and then the disappointment that you felt, and then that realization that like something that you didn't see yourself doing then became something that you were disappointed with that didn't happen. Mm-hmm. Like there's so much in front of us that we don't know what it's like to experience, but had we gotten a taste of it, we'd be disappointed if we didn't go into it. And there's certainly no certainty to that, but it really makes a person wonder, like, why are we not taking more risks on ourselves? Why are we not doing that inner work that we need in this time that we have? Like 2020 might be a crazy year, but it doesn't mean that we can't push the needle in some way. It doesn't mean that we can't know what we don't know. When it came to doing the inner work, what was your aha moment? Like, what were some things that stood out to you in like body image and self-awareness and finding that you needed to rest and all that stuff?
So I have a mentor, and his name is Jim Fortin, and he talks about how, and this is going to sound dark, but it's true. He talks about how death is our greatest teacher. And I think if COVID has taught us anything, it really has, in the sense that A, we need to prioritize our health, and B, and there are multiple people that have experienced an unanticipated loss in their life. And it's always those moments where we come to this crossroads, for, lack of a better word, a metaphor, if you will, of where you recognize and you have that moment of like, I wish, maybe you don't say I wish, but it's that moment of like, for me, that moment of loss where you're like, it's that wake up call. It's that recognition of like, I've been asleep to myself. And that just, I know that it's brain based. We do 95% of what we do is done on automation. It's habit based, part of our habits. And that fear urgency that we get is designed to keep us safe. And anytime we're making a change, whether it's positive or negative, that fear urgency is going to send a signal to keep us safe. So I've been working with Jim for a while, who helps me a lot on this personal, on the personal development side in terms of the recognizing this. But what happened for me in terms of that body image was that my kid came out and two things. I was so desperate, and I mean desperate, to have what I called at the time a natural birth, which is now, a vaginal birth, right? I use a vaginal birth. I was so desperate to have that, and I was so desperate to breastfeed. And the two main reasons when I look back on that, it's because I wanted my body back, and I wanted my body back at any cost. And when I say at any cost, I mean that I literally, like Gwen, my eldest, she had a failure to descend. So my pelvis is too small for her to come out. But I was so determined that I was like screaming, go and get the forceps. Like I wanted the doctor to like compromise my life, essentially, to bring Gwen into this world. And for why? And for what? For my body, to get my body back. And it wasn't until my husband came into the room. And now my husband, for those of you who know him or have seen him, he's like 6'4", stoic, police detective. Like he, it's just, very, just kind of very emotionally detached. And he just seems like he is, but he comes into the labor and delivery room and he's crying, and he's standing next to me and he's crying and he's saying, Beverley, please just have the C-section, like just go and have a cesarean. And I'm like, why are you crying? And it turns out later that it was because the doctor had told him, like, listen, you're going to lose your wife and you're going to lose your daughter if she doesn't get over this and go and do the cesarean. And so when I went and I went and had the cesarean, like they had to put me under general anesthesia. It was such a whirlwind of time, right? It's 5 years now. But when you look back on it and you're like, oh, you mean I was going to die? And you mean Gwen was going to die? And you think, well, why would you ever do that? And when you start asking yourself those questions and realizing that it was for the sake of how you looked, that's kind of like punches you in the face and says, okay, Beverley, you've got some work to do. If you're really going to do, at all cost, you need to take a look at that. And that was when it was starting to be like, oh, the theater industry was never about that. It was never about how I looked. I was the one who said that.
I mean, that takeaway, that's something that people honestly need to hear. There's a lot of new parents that gravitate towards my podcast. There's lots of my friends in the industry that are going to be growing their family. You help people now with your past experiences. Like I snooped your website and stuff. Like, what are the greatest connecting pieces that you have to kind of guide people along with their parenthood experience or their body image experience when it comes to just fitness and stuff?
Mm-hmm. So I will say that I have moved away a lot from the mom world, but those two stories. Oh, and for the record, I couldn't breastfeed. It was terrible. And so I ended up gaining like 60 pounds, right? So I had an extra 50 pounds. So now you're looking at a mom who has, for me personally, right? I'm on a small frame, like my pelvis was small. I couldn't birth children, and I have an extra 60 pounds. So I am correct. And I already have body image stuff. So I literally am in this body that I couldn't recognize. And so for me, what happened, and for the record, those two stories, I'm so grateful for that they happened, because if it didn't happen, I never would have been able to, I would never be here, and I would never be able to help the hundreds of moms that I have helped. And so for me, the linchpin, right? So I now teach, trainers how to find their unique mechanism. What is it that is specific for you that sets you apart in the marketplace? And for me, it was this, and it was very rewarding but challenging to get people to see, which is that your weight loss journey, there is nothing wrong with wanting weight loss, but it's not going to fix your mental image of yourself. That your weight loss is an outcome, and it is a reflection of how you feel about yourself on the inside. So my weight loss journey for the first time ever, after having children, it was not actually about how many calories were in, how many, what's my macro count, what's my macro breakdown. It was more like, hey, can you look at yourself in the mirror today and love yourself now as it is? And if nothing were to change, would you be okay? And it was more about recognizing what my habits were, what my self-talk was, and changing that first. Weight loss, sustainable weight loss, that in my opinion, and what I taught, started from the inside. It started from and it started from your habits, because you need to be the person that is healthy and fit from the start. And it's not about the outcomes, it's about what's inside. And people who feel healthy and fit, and I mean really healthy and fit. I don't mean that I'm not talking about people that struggle with their own body image, because you've got personal trainers on the other side, right? They're doing cardio and doing body competition. They've got body dysmorphia too. It's just different. So I'm talking about someone who's really healthy and fit. They're not looking at themselves, berating themselves all day in the mirror. So for me, I start there. That was where I needed to start. And so it was kind of one of those hey, you can't change what you don't know. And so it needs to be you need to bring attention and bring awareness to what is it that you were saying to yourself about yourself. And you know what? This is another reason why I love children, because if you don't know, listen to what they repeat.
Wow.
What do they say about their body and their diet? Because what they repeat is what you say.
That is true. Even with me and my nieces, I hear what comes up. I hear what is the most frequently said phrases and points and things that attention is drawn towards. Something that I want to showcase in this episode. So we talked about how you've kind of helped me with my social media, and you've been part of the Compound Performance Mentorship. And I know as a trainer that referrals, testimonials are probably one of the most powerful things that we can do. And so I'll give some context as to you and your offerings and how it stands out to me, being someone who's very snobby about people whose help that I seek. And so I'll break it down. You are able to assess a person's who they are, what they're about, and without changing them, bring out who they are in a better light. So you audited my Instagram, and I've always been so stubborn that I wouldn't change who I am. I'm not going to be I help young entrepreneurs. It's just the voice that I'm going to put out is always going to be my voice. And you were able to let me maintain that. And so that is why I'm going to explain a bit further. It's just it's kind of like you said with your mentor, helping to find those little inefficiencies, not necessarily even changing what a person does, but just how they do it, how they manage their time, how they manage their energy, helping them discover is money tied to the amount of hours, or is money tied to the value that you have to offer? So I'm going to open the window up for do you have anything coming up that a person could get the chance to see what you're all about?
And first of all, thank you. That is so kind of you to say. I mean, I really do live with that. And it's something that one of my mentors has also said to me, is that the truth of the matter is that all of the answers is inside of you. You already know what you want to do. You already know what your message is and who you want to help. You already know that. The job of the coach, in my humble opinion, is to remove the roadblocks and to help you see clarity. It's not to give you the latest, like, here's the latest, greatest funnel. This is the best. Because listen, at the end of the day, it all works. It's just like diets, right? It's just like fitness. At the end of the day, it's all about, it all works. It's more about, what's the most effective and efficient way possible to get it to go, and that's going to resonate for you. And can you find that coach, that mentor that is going to remove those roadblocks for you in a way that works for you? So I'll say that the best way, if you want to come hang out and find out what I'm about, come hang out with me on Instagram. I'm at B Simpson Fitness, and in that link, and there's a bio in the bio, there's a link for you to download your content calendar, your content planner rather, and it'll walk you through a process of how you can start finding your message and what to post for the next 7 days, so that you can connect and attract and connect with your ideal client. So if you want to check that out, that's where that would live.
And it's amazing how much like one incremental step in the right direction can like enlighten a person. Like sometimes it is truly like you don't know what you don't know. And so when you kind of take the time to set aside like the couple hours a day to like commit to a process, then you get like that feedback as to like, oh, like I actually applied this concept that was put in front of me, and I saw progress. I saw that what I was already doing wasn't the wrong thing, but maybe a different way about doing it garnered a better outcome. I'm going to segue into a couple final questions. And so one of the questions which I ask 100% of my guests, except for the times that I forget, is if you could give one... If you could give one piece of advice on how to live your life to the fullest in the most authentic way, what would that piece of advice be?
The number one piece of advice that I would give that I haven't already said, I'll say that, is that the faster you can detach yourself from outcomes, the better. And what I mean specifically about that is that anything that happens in your business, in your life, in your fitness goals, anything, whether it is positive or whether it is negative, the faster that you can emotionally detach from it, and when I say detach, I mean detach meaning about who you are as a person, as based on the outcome, the better, the more fulfilling of a life you're going to feel. Because if you set a goal and you don't reach it, it doesn't mean anything about you as a coach. It doesn't mean anything about you as a person. And the way that I explain that is, listen, I want you to think about, especially for new parents or parents that are on here, go back to that moment when you first held your baby and ask yourself, did you hold that baby and say, I'll love you when? I'll love you when you have that business. I love you when you lose that, last 10 pounds. I'll love you when you get 50. No, you didn't. That baby was just perfect. And all that baby did was eat, poop, and cry. That's it. Okay. That baby was worth it just because that baby exists. And so when you can detach yourself from the negative feedback, the better. And then also the positive. If you make $1 million, you make 250K, you crush that client goal, that also doesn't mean anything about you. Doesn't mean anything. It just is an outcome. And the idea is that you can increase the performance of that outcome and you live your life fully just because you are who you are today.
Well, I really liked that analogy. Like that's something that even non-parents could like really absorb. I mean, to understand that like if we're all out there eating, pooping, and sleeping, we're just fine. we can love ourselves. Fine. Yeah. Another thing that I do for each episode is I'll get the guest to give a challenge for the day. And so essentially, like the floor is all yours. You get to say your episode challenge for the day is, and just let them have it.
And it could be based on anything?
Anything at all.
Anything that they want to do. Okay, so because I'm a marketer and I'm a content creator, I will say that your episode challenge for today is to go out there and post one post on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn or anything. Even if you're not a fitness professional and you're just, you're a fitness enthusiast, I want you to go out there and post something that's going to connect to your people that makes you feel uncomfortable. But do it anyway.
I love that. I think that's a great way to get somebody introspective. If they're having a tough time, it's a great way to reflect and kind of just remind yourself that no matter what shit you're sitting in today, you're going to be just fine because you're eating, pooping, and sleeping.
That's right. Everything. You are enough as you are today, and everything is fine. It's always going to be fine.
So thank you so much for joining me. That wraps it up for today.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.